Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian. I'm here again today at the Rock Island Auction Company looking at some of the guns they'll be selling in their April of 2016 regional or premier auction. And now yesterday we talked about a 32 caliber 7.65mm Hamada pistol made for the Japanese military during World War II. Today we're going to take a look at the second half of the Hamada story. This is an 8mm Hamada pistol. So as I mentioned yesterday, Hamada was a little private gun shop, actually a fairly big private gun shop in Tokyo that was kind of pressed into military service. They were told, now they were paid for their guns, but they were told they had to manufacture pistols for the military. Okay, cool, it's a war, whatever. And they built this 32 caliber blowback pistol, worked well, nice officer's gun, manufactured almost potentially 5,000 of them between 1941 and 1944. Now, in 1942, while they're basically just as this production is reaching its full tempo, the Army approached Hamada again and said, you know, we'd kind of rather have 8mm Nambu as our standard pistol cartridge. We want to focus on that and not have to deal with the 32 and some of the other small caliber cartridges that were being used. So they wanted Hamada to redesign his pistol for 8mm Nambu and start producing that. Okay, not a problem. He, in a fairly short period of time, was able to scale up his design, revised it. It remained a simple blowback action. The 8mm Nambu is not a particularly powerful cartridge. Maybe not quite as weak as some people make it out to be, but it's stronger than the 32 ACP, but it's still a weak enough cartridge that it can be used with a simple blowback action. A little heavier recoil spring, little heavier slide than the 32s, you're good to go. Now Hamada sent a couple of prototypes and the design over to the Army Ordnance Department where, and I should point out, he tested this first, a couple hundred rounds through, gun worked well. It was rejected without even a shot fired by the Ordnance Department, specifically an officer named Major Yato. It turns out the problem is Major Yato wasn't willing to accept a military pistol designed by some mere civilian. In order to be a proper military gun, it had to at least have some design provenance from a military official. So the Major recommends a couple of changes to the design, not necessarily significant ones. Hamada makes those changes, comes back, the gun is rejected a second time. They make another set of, again, relatively minor changes, nothing fundamental. Most significantly, they changed the fire control mechanism. It still works basically the same way, but the design is a bit different. And the styling of the pistol is a bit different. So this has a more angled grip. The magazine actually looks very similar to a Type 94 Nambu magazine. And interestingly, Hamada's initial design has an 8-round magazine, and the final design here that was accepted by the military, finally, in 1943, actually only has a 6-round magazine. So by adding their own design elements in order to save some face and have some claim of ownership over the design, the military actually reduced the magazine capacity by 2 rounds, and according to Hamada, they also increased the manufacturing time, the number of manufacturing steps in the gun. So they probably would have been better just sticking with his original design, but that would be a bit unseemly, so it was not done. Now, the story gets a bit interesting at this point. In order to manufacture these, they didn't want to stop making the 32s because, hey, production's going well, we still do need guns, we just wanted to get some more 8mm in the pipeline. So they went and found a shuttered textiles factory in Notobe, Japan, and bought it to set up for manufacture. The manufacturing tools were provided by the Torimatsu factory, which was part of the Nagoya arsenal. So tooling came in from there, hired a bunch of workers, got started, and in February of 1944, they delivered their first batch of 500 pistols. Now, these guns were delivered unfinished, you'd say in the white. And the idea was they wouldn't bother setting up a finishing area room plant at this Notobe factory. They would just send the unfinished, so I should say mechanically finished, but without being, say, blued or parkerized. They'd send these guns over to Nagoya's Torimatsu factory and they'd be finished there and then shipped out to wherever they were being sent. Now what's interesting is that only 17 of these pistols are known to still survive today. Almost, well, all but one of them in the United States. And every single one that's known to survive is in the white like this. And the highest serial number is 50. The serial numbers that have been found are scattered between 2 and 50. This particular one is number 12. That's pretty weird. If these guns had actually been issued, shipped out, and used in combat, you would expect a significant number of them to have been captured in combat at the end of the war or surrendered to American forces. And none of them were. At least none of them that had actually been blued were ever found. So there are a couple possible explanations for this. The first one is maybe, well, I should back up a bit, because these are a non-standard pistol, non-standard parts, they probably would have been handled as a single big batch, either a one batch of 1,500 guns, which is the total that the Notobe factory produced, or batches of like 500 at a time. They would have been shipped to as units to, or as groups to specific units. They wouldn't have been handing one Hamada to a guy in a unit when everyone else has Nambus. No, you'd get a whole group of guys, equip them all with Hamadas. It simplifies the logistics. So it's possible that all of these pistols went into China, and because it's only 1,500 of them, maybe they all just disappeared. Maybe that some are still there and we don't know it. Maybe they were all destroyed in combat or lost in the jungle. That's one possibility. Another possibility is that they were shipped somewhere, but the ship was sunk en route. A distinct possibility, the US was sinking an awful lot of Japanese transport ships at the time. So again, being handled all as a single unit, the idea that one ship goes down and all of the Hamada pistols are on it, that's not necessarily inconceivable. The other possibility is that they were finished at Torimatsu and then they were stuck in a warehouse to be ready to ship somewhere, or potentially they arrived at Torimatsu and were warehoused waiting to be finished and destroyed by US bombers. Also a distinct possibility, the US was bombing Japanese cities, especially military installations, left and right at the end of the war. So any of these things could explain why there are no completed Hamadas that have been discovered. Why these first 50 in the white still survived, we don't really know. Obviously they were handled as a separate group, which is why they did survive. They didn't take the same path that resulted in the destruction of all the others. They may have stayed at the original factory. They may have been set aside for some reason. Whatever it was, a bunch of them were captured and taken as souvenirs by US troops. Now, at the end of the war, in addition to having finished 1,500 of these, or having manufactured 1,500 of these, the Notobe factory also had produced parts for another 2,500 guns that they just hadn't been able to assemble. That's what they were working on when the atom bombs dropped and the war ended. There isn't any documentation of what happened to those parts, but they were almost certainly either melted down for scrap, which would have been quite useful at the time, or simply dumped in Tokyo Harbor, which is what the US occupation troops did with an awful lot of Japanese military ordnance. It wasn't necessary. There's no reason to keep it. On a barge, dump it in the harbor, effectively destroy it. So there may be 2,500 sets of parts for Hamada pistols that have rusted away into nothing at the bottom of the bay. That's kind of how it goes at the end of the war. Anyway, the internals of this are similar to the .32 caliber Hamadas, but they are a little bit different. So why don't we go ahead and take this apart and take a closer look at the inside of it. So as I mentioned, this is entirely in the white, wood grips, and not a speck of bluing on it, because these were not blued at the actual Hamada manufacturing facility. This is serial number 12. It's marked in a couple places. So these markings you will find on all of the 8mm Hamada pistols. This plus is the symbol for the Notobe factory, kind of similar to the symbol used on the .32 Hamadas, for good reason. It's the same basic company. And then this is 2 and Shiki, or type. So this was adopted in 1943 as the Type 2 pistol. It's interesting, the Hamada was the Type Hamada, this was the Type 2. There was no official Type 1. We have a safety here, just like the .32 caliber guns. We have a heel magazine release, just like the .32 caliber guns. The magazine here, if you looked at a Type 94 magazine, you'll see it looks very similar. The magazines were serial numbered on these, unlike the .32 caliber guns. So you can see right there, this is serial number 12. Interesting little detail, that dot above the 12 is not a mistake or a dent. These pistols were issued with 2 magazines each, and they were both serial numbered to the gun, and the second magazine, the spare, was marked with that extra dot. So this is actually the number 2 magazine for this pistol. Who knows where the number 1 magazine is? It is lost forever. These cutouts on the top of the slide are distinctive to the 8mm Hamadas. There's no specific reason for them to be there. I expect they were there because the full weight of the slide without them was probably too heavy for reliable operation. They needed to lighten it a bit, so they cut out these sections of the slide just to lighten it. Now, disassembly works just the same way as the .32s. We have a little catch here under our disassembly tab, so we'll pull the catch backwards, pull this down, and then I pull the slide back and lift it off. Unlike the .32s, these do not have any specific marks you can line up to tell you exactly when the slide will come off. However, it simply does. There it is. Once again, we have our recoil spring fitting around the barrel and then in the front of the slide. These are striker fired. So we have our striker in here. This one, it looks like the tip of the firing pin is broken and stuck in there, unfortunately. But there's the striker setup. Pretty basic, pretty simple. This cutout is for an out-of-battery safety. So we have a little piece right here in the frame, and this lines up with that. If this is pushed down, it disengages the firing mechanism so that you can't fire the gun when it's out of battery. Like the .32 caliber Hamadas, the barrel is actually in a rotary dovetail. So unlike the Browning pistols, it doesn't have an interrupted thread. To take the barrel out, we grab it and actually rotate it 90 degrees clockwise, and then it lifts out. That's a very clever, cool feature, I think, that I'm happy to see that the military allowed Hamada to leave in the pistols. Now the trigger mechanism on this is, like I said, it works pretty much. The idea is sort of the same, but the mechanical setup is different. When I pull the trigger, it pulls this hook down. That would release the striker, which would go forward, fire the pistol, and then when the slide reciprocates, it pushes down on this guy right there, which then trips. Let's see, I'll do it from back here so you can see it. When I push down on that, it releases this catch, which pops back up. That's your semi-auto disconnect, and then it can't fire again until you release the trigger and pull it a second time. Well, thank you for watching, guys. I hope you've enjoyed the video. This is an exquisitely rare pistol to get a chance to look at. I'm really happy that we did. And if you would like to own it yourself, add it to your own collection, take a look at the link in the description text below. That will take you to Rock Island's catalog page on this pistol. Take a look at their pictures and description of it. And if you are so interested, you can place a bid right there on the website. Thanks for watching.